Ladies ready? Oops. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Lancaster City Council meeting for October 11th. I now call this meeting to order. Just at the top of the meeting, I have a few housekeeping reminders for everyone. First, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed for the city's YouTube channel. Take a moment to silence your devices at this time if you haven't already. Additionally, if you are making public comment this evening during one of our public comment periods or on a particular item, please make sure to limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes and always start with your name and your block of residence for the record. And now I'll ask anyone who is willing and able to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Mr. Harris, if you would call the roll of members.
Yes, Madam Vice President. Mr. Royo. Ms. Baquet.
Here.
Mr. Calise.
Here.
Ms. Craig. Ms. Diaz.
Here.
Ms. Walsh.
Here.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. We'll now take on the approval of the minutes for the September 27th meeting of council.
Motion to approve?
Second. We have a motion and a second. Are there any council comments on the minutes? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Ms. Baker.
Aye.
Mr. Calise.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
And Ms. Walsh.
Aye. Thank you. That takes us into proclamations, honors, awards, and resolutions of recognition. Do we have any this evening, Mr. Harris?
We do. First is a mayoral proclamation for Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, if you could please, I guess I'll hear a motion on the, no, it's not, it's a mayoral proclamation. Thank you for keeping me honest. If you could actually begin by reading the proclamation, Mr. Harris?
Certainly.
Thank you. I have it. I'll pick it up when I come down.
Proclamation Domestic Violence Awareness Month, October 2022. Whereas, in just one day, across the U.S. and its territories, 76,525 victims of domestic violence receive services from domestic violence programs and shelters. That same day, more than 11,000 requests for services, including emergency shelter, housing, transportation, child care, and legal representation, could not be provided because programs lack the resources to meet victims' needs. And whereas, the impact of domestic violence is wide-ranging, directly affecting individuals and society as a whole, here in this community, throughout the United States and the world. And whereas, racism, homophobia, transphobia, ageism, and discrimination based on physical ability, nationality, or other factors helps to perpetuate domestic violence and make finding safety even more difficult for some victims. And whereas, the need for safe, affordable housing continues to be rated as survivors' most urgent need. And whereas, Lancaster joins with others across Pennsylvania and the nation in supporting victims of domestic violence, as well as local programs, state coalitions, and national organizations who are committed to increasing public awareness of domestic violence and sending a clear message to abusive individuals that domestic violence is not tolerated in Lancaster. And whereas, domestic violence impacts millions of people each year, but it can be prevented. Preventing domestic violence requires the collective voice and power of survivors, individuals, families, institutions, and systems whose stories of strength and resilience add valuable and powerful components to transforming our communities. Now, therefore, I, Deneen Sirachi, Mayor of the City of Lancaster, do hereby proclaim October 2022 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and in recognition of the important work done by survivors, domestic violence services of Lancaster County, and other victim service providers, I urge all citizens to actively participate in the scheduled activities and programs sponsored by DVS and its community partners to work toward the elimination of intimate partner violence. Signed, Deneen Sirachi, Mayor of the City of Lancaster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. This is an extremely important proclamation and something for us to recognize each year when October comes around. This evening, we have two folks that will speak a little bit more about this. The first is our Chief of Police, Chief Mendez. Thank you so much for being here.
Good evening, and thanks for having me. Domestic Violence Awareness Month was first launched in 1987 to connect and unite individuals and organizations working on domestic violence issues while raising awareness of these issues. Since 1987, there's been a lot of progress made to support domestic violence victims and survivors and hold perpetrators accountable. Here in the city of Lancaster, we have several organizations leading in this effort, including but not limited to the following organizations: Domestic Violence Services, YWCA, and Clare House. I can't express enough the incredible support and impact these services providers have in our city. Our public safety team has responded to over 1,400 domestic disturbance calls so far in 2022, though I believe the real number of incidents is likely higher. Additionally, Lancaster County is ranked third highest in domestic violence fatalities in PA, according to the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence's 2021 Fatality Report. This is a concern and a priority as chief and for our bureau. Responding to domestic violence calls also has a significant impact on our public safety personnel. Across the country, over 40 officers were killed while responding to domestic disturbance calls between 2011 and 2020, accounting for almost 9% of public safety personnel-related deaths. Not only do our officers face physical dangers when responding to domestic, it can also have negative effects on their mental well-being. Officers exposed to both acute and chronic stress. These stressors commonly experienced among law enforcement officers impact adverse physiological, psychological, and physical outcomes. Our police bureau was one of the first in Lancaster County to implement the lethality assessment program. This is a very important program which assists officers in connecting high-risk victims to domestic violence services. Both in my role as chief of police and as a citizen, I am grateful for the work organizations like Domestic Violence Services, the YWCA, and Clare House provide the victims of domestic violence. It's up to all of us to work together to recognize the signs of domestic violence and do our part to prevent domestic violence and provide compassionate support for victims. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you so much, Chief. And to what you were saying, this evening we are also joined by Director of the Domestic Violence Services at the Community Action Partnership, Christine Gillifan. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. I want to thank the Chief for being here as well. My name is Christine Gillifan, and I'm the Director at Domestic Violence Services. I'd like to thank Mayor Sirachi and the City Council for the proclamation and for recognizing our work. We're very fortunate to live in a city and a community that so strongly supports our efforts, so we appreciate that. DVS served over 1,800 adults and children last year with hotline and text line services, safety planning, safe house or emergency shelter, transitional housing, legal services, and a range of other supportive services. Those are just the individuals who reached out to us or who engaged in our services, not the hundreds or thousands of people that we know are either suffering in silence or relying upon friends, family members, and in some cases their workplaces to provide the safety and support that they need. Obviously, we can't do this work alone. Despite the robust support that DVS receives, the demand for emergency and supportive services exceeds our capacity, as it mentioned in the proclamation, exceeds our capacity to be able to meet it. Our counseling services have a wait list. Every day, we must tell one or two families that our shelter is at capacity. And rental housing is so costly that we struggle to assist survivors to move to their own safe and affordable homes. Our community partners are experiencing the same challenges in terms of helping victims and survivors. So we appreciate your continued assistance and your support to try to fill these services gaps as well, and save lives, save more lives. There are 3 goals for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Mourning Lives Lost. We have a silent witness project that you're probably familiar with that's traveling around the county throughout this month. Honoring the advocates who work to end the violence. That's where we work to honor and support our staff members who, similar to what police officers experience and was expressed by the chief, are also struggling, to maintain their drive and their stable mental health in terms of doing this work. So we want to support them, and then also celebrating survivors, because fortunately most individuals do survive domestic violence. So how do we celebrate them, tell their stories, lift up their experiences for everyone to hear? So we do have a number of events and observances. You can find those at caplank.org/DVAM, or as easily or more easily by following our social media sites. Join us if you can. Thank you very much again for this opportunity. We appreciate it.
Christine, thank you so very much for being here. And again, this is a proclamation, so we're not voting on anything this evening, but I know that you, the work that you do, the folks that work for your organization have the strong support of everyone here on council and in the city. The work you do is so very important. We're going to take, with everyone's forbearance, just a moment to do a photograph this evening. So pardon me while we do that.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, thank you. Mr. Harris, are there additional proclamations, honors, awards, or resolutions of recognition this evening?
Yes, we have Council Resolution number 83.
I will hear a motion.
Is this first reading? Are we going to be able to vote?
This is a resolution, so we can take a motion and vote tonight.
Okay. Motion for Resolution 83022 in support to propose legislation to allow undocumented immigrants to obtain state driver's license.
Second.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second.
Madam Vice President, if I can read the title.
Sure, yes, please.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster supporting proposed legislation which would allow undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's license issued by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Thank you very much. We do have a motion and a second, and I do have some information on this resolution. This was discussed at our previous council meeting. It was introduced by President Smith Waddell. Just bringing up my notes here about that. Go. This resolution was brought to our attention through several immigrant rights organizations that do work here in the city of Lancaster. Obviously, we have a large immigrant population and refugee population here in the city, and this is something that's extremely important to them, as not having valid identification or driver's license is a huge barrier for them to get to their places of employment, and they are major contributors to our economy here. And that is important that we allow them the basic right of having documentation so that they can drive a car, get to their place of work, have a job in the first place. So that's why this was brought forward to us. I'll take any council comments on the resolution. Or from members of the public. Hearing none. Mr. Harris.
Ms. Baker.
Aye.
Mr. Calise.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
Thank you very much. That brings us to our first public comment period. It's reserved for residents who have called ahead or contacted the city clerk ahead of time to request the opportunity to speak to council. Again, comments are limited to no longer than 3 minutes in length and should begin with your name and your block of residence. Mr. Harris, do we have public comment this evening?
Yes, we do, Madam Vice President. We have Sean Dominsick. Sorry for butchering your last name, sir.
Thank you very much. Mr. Domensick, good evening.
Thank you. Yes, Sean Domensick, 400 block of Fremont Street, and Catholic worker here in the city. I wanted to respond to, as I've been asked before about why I've been representing the issue I've been coming here repeatedly on, why that particular issue, there's so many different things that can be done for housing. And so I recognize, the city, the mayor's office, other organizations are involved in working to expand affordable and emergency housing. I'm very grateful for that. I thank you for keeping the housing crisis on your agenda, but I'm advocating regarding what I think is obviously the single most important issue of the crisis, which is human rights. From Article 25 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights to resources from Tenfold to the lips of many here present, we'd all agree that housing is a human right. So if housing is a human right, what does that mean? Human rights, they're grounded in the sort of natural law tradition. There's a long history of recognizing them as something that's inherent in our humanity, and it's not revocable by any government or any merely human law. And again, there's a long history of recognizing that in common law, in U.S. Legal jurisprudence, and it's understood that human rights have to be recognized to ensure peace and order and to distinguish between a just government and a violent tyranny. With that said, I don't see how any other issue on the agenda rises to the urgency of this. There's a law in the code and enforcement by police which regularly violates human rights here in Lancaster City. I'm aware of the many housing initiatives that are on the table, but how can we trust municipal government which does not first defend and uphold human rights? So, again, I'm making no claims that this is going to solve the housing crisis. I recognize that there's lots of other work to be done, but it is the first step to ensure that to show that the city is honestly and seriously committed to solving the housing crisis in the first place. So I recognize there's various concerns and issues that have to be figured out with that, but again, the actual legislation, I think, comes first because it is a human rights issue. So thank you for your time. You all have my email and phone number, so please feel free to keep me updated or to contact me with anything that you want from me to help move this forward. I don't represent any grand organization or anything that's advocating on this. It's just me and friends who are concerned about this issue and those we love and care about who are on the streets in Lancaster and those we don't know who may be on the streets. Again, the housing crisis continues. It is very severe. And so, again, thank you for your time, and please consider moving forward on this legislation.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your advocacy. Mr. Harris, are there any others this evening?
No, there's not, Madam Vice President.
Thank you very much. That will take us to reports requested by council. Are there any this evening, Mr. Harris?
There are not, Madam Vice President.
That takes us then to reports of committees of council. This is from our October 3rd, 2022 meeting. We'll begin with public safety and Councilor Diaz.
Yes, we have ordinance for first reading, Administration Bill 21, 2022, amending the firework ordinance, and that would be basically first reading, and we will discuss it at our agenda.
Thank you very much. Public Works Committee, Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Council Vice President. The Public Works Committee did meet, and a resolution will be presented during our legislative agenda as it relates to a grant application for construction of a boardwalk of the Northeast Greenway Trail. And that concludes the report.
Thank you very much. Economic Development Committee, that would be Councilor Arroyo, who is not here this evening. I can report on that. The Economic Development Committee did not meet. That would take us to Finance Committee. Just me. The Finance Committee met on October 3rd and discussed three related resolutions, 79, 80, and 81. Those are changes to general obligation bond funds from 2011, 2014, and 2018 respectively. And Resolution 79, unspent funds left over from completed sewer projects will be moved to the Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant's Oxygen Control Escrow Account, which would close that bond fund. Resolution 80 would reallocate unspent funds to the same place, and Resolution 81 would reallocate funds from delayed project to other already approved projects. These resolutions are on our legislative agenda again this evening for further discussion. And that concludes my report, which takes us to community planning, which would be Councilor Craig. And Councilor Kalik, you're taking that one this evening?
Thank you, Vice President. The Community Planning Committee met on Monday to discuss the Administration Resolution Number 84, 2022, authorizing a projection easement for the 202 North Queen Street project. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. And that takes us then to Personnel Committee, which is also Councilor Kalik.
Thank you again. The Personnel Committee met on Monday, October 3rd, and reviewed nominations for appointment to the Lancaster County Convention Center Authority, Lancaster Housing Authority, Historical Commission, Historical Architectural Review Board, Public Art Advisory Board, and Zoning Hearing Board. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. That will move us into our legislative agenda, legislative agenda this evening. We begin with nominations for appointment. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Madam Vice President, that would be a motion from Mr. Calise.
Yes. Councilor Kalik.
Yes, I make a motion to appoint or reappoint the following individuals. Patrick Snyder to the Lancaster County Convention Center Authority for a term from September 15, 2022 to September 15, 2025. Emily Samuel to the Lancaster Housing Authority for a term from November 21st, 2022 to November 21st, 2027. And Danielle Kepperling to the Historical Commission for a term from December 31st, 2022 to December 31st, 2025. And John Lefevre to the Historical Commission for a term from December 31st, 2022 to December 31st, 2025. And John Spiedeler to the Historical Commission for a term from December 31st, 2022 to December 31st, 2025. And Kurt Strauss to the Historical Architectural Review Board for a term from December 31st, 2022 to December 31st, 2025. And John Lefevre to the Historical Architectural Review Board for a term from December 31st, 2022 to December 31st, 2025. And John McGrain to the Public Art Advisory Board for a term from July 31st, 2022 to July 31st, 2024. And Molly Kirchhoff to the Sign Commission for a term from August 31st, 2022 to August 31st, 2025. And Michael Mola to the Public Art Advisory Board for a term from October 11, 2022 to July 31st, 2024. And Sisava Ole Hongvanten to the Public Art Advisory Board for a term from October 11, 2022 to July 31st, 2023.
We have a motion. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Any council comments on the appointments? I will just say a hearty thank you to all of those folks for stepping up. There's a lot of them this time around, and we couldn't do all of the work of the city without those volunteers that have stepped up. And there are openings in the future if anyone is interested in serving on boards, commissions, or authorities. Any public comments? Hearing none. Mr. Harris.
Ms. Baker?
Aye.
Mr. Calise?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
And Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right, that takes us to item B, ordinance for a first reading. Bill number 21. Mr. Harris?
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lancaster prohibiting the use of consumer fireworks within the City of Lancaster, but providing for permits in certain cases.
Thank you. And Councilor Diaz?
Yes, it has been determined that the General Assembly back in June the 6th, 2022, and by the Governor in July the 11th, it's become effective on September 9th, 2022, related to fireworks purchased by consumers and usage display fireworks in the Commonwealth. We need to have the municipality to prohibit and restrict certain uses of consumer fireworks as defined as a law, and the municipality determined to certain conditions that have to be met. They will need to get authorization on the local rules and regulations by Lancaster City with governed permits. There also have been determined that the public exercise, they would be definitely would be fined $500, and if they break the law, then they would be $1,000 for each incident. They also have determined that consumer fireworks may not be utilized within the City of Lancaster without being within 100 to 150 feet of a building or vehicle, or within 300 feet from animal housing, which would be any type of livestock or any other type of managed by another person. So at this point, they're just trying to make sure that buildings, vehicles, and animals, and any type of potential danger, to protect them, and we will move forward with that coming on our next city council meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Diaz. This is a first reading, and I just would also like to add that Chief Mendez attended our committee meeting on the 3rd to speak on this and the importance of this, and we're really grateful that there has been some change at the state legislature around being able to enact these local fireworks ordinances. And the goal, while the punishment, the offense, the fine that's in the ordinance as written, as Councilor Diaz stated, would be $500 for a first offense or $1,000 for any subsequent. The goal is really to educate folks and not have them actually be fined, but just let them know that using commercial grade fireworks would not be permissible anywhere in the city based on proximity. Are there any other council comments on the ordinance this evening?
It's really important to make sure that children are not having access because of an incident in York where a child basically died. They exposed the fireworks in a trash can and it caught fire, and unfortunately a child was lost. So I'm hoping that this is really pushed forward, and because of these incidents, and to avoid any type of fires at homes or any other type of catastrophe.
Thank you. Any public comments this evening? All right, hearing none, this will be on our agenda for the next meeting for a final vote. That takes us to item C on your agendas, resolutions, and we have resolution number 78. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster appointing Michaela Allwine, 657 West Chestnut Street, as a member to the City of Lancaster Zoning Hearing Board for a 3-year term effective January 1st, 2023.
I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and that is Councilor Calixte.
So there isn't much to say about this resolution. It's pretty straightforward. It's Miss Michaela Allwine has been serving on the zoning hearing board for quite some time, so it's a resolution from council to reappoint her so she can continue serving on the board.
Thank you. Any other council comments? Or from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris?
Ms. Beque?
Aye.
Mr. Calise?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
Thank you very much. That takes us to Administration Resolution Number 79. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster approving an amended capital project list to be funded by the proceeds of the City of Lancaster General Obligation Bonds Series of 2011.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Director Hopkins is here this evening. If you would like to reacquaint us with this resolution and how it relates to the next two as well.
Thank you, Counselor. So, as you mentioned in your review of the Finance Committee meeting on October 3rd, this resolution number 79 is really just closing out funding that was, in this case, primarily from two legal settlements related to projects at or related to the city sewer system, and move those funds to close out the 2011 bond fund, and then move those funds to an escrow account in the 2014 bond fund. This is exercise really just to this resolution and the next two resolutions are an exercise either to close out projects that have been fully funded and completed, and move excess funds to other projects that are either in progress right now or planned in the coming year or two.
Thank you very much. Are there any other council comments on the resolution?
Council Vice President, I do have a question. Looking at Exhibit B here, Mr. Hopkins, what is the actual change in this particular resolution of 79? Is that the
So
change
for-
of 305,000?
Yes, that's right. So there are two legal settlement funds of one is 297,320. The other is 8,076 funds remaining. Those funds, along with a whopping $138 and some odd cents, are being moved to the 2014 bond fund. And then the exhibit on the next resolution, you see where those funds come in and are assigned to a particular escrow account.
And then one follow-up question, when we say legal settlement funds, is that just, can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so typically, with the exception of when we get to $138 and some odd cents, we can't move proceeds from one bond issue in one fund to another fund. The legal settlement funds are a little bit different. There were two separate legal actions that were going on where the city received a payment from the defendant in the case. Those funds were initially applied to the project that the legal issue was related to in the 2011 bond fund. Those particular projects had been completed, and so effectively the legal settlement funds were now excess funds just sitting in that 2011 bond fund. So now we're putting them to use in another project. They weren't limited to just being used for that particular project.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any public comments? Hearing none, Mr. Harris?
Ms. Baquet?
Aye.
Mr. Calise?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
Thank you. This takes us to Resolution 80, number 2022. Mr. Harris?
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster approving an amended capital project list to be funded by the proceeds of the City of Lancaster General Obligation Bonds Series of 2014.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. This might be Groundhog Day all over again, Mr. Hopkins, but just to reconfirm that this is us allocating that same dollar amount to the 2014 general obligation
Well,
bond.
it's doing two different things. So it is the
Thank you.
305,000 that's moving over from the 2011 bond fund,
Mhm.
and then reducing project number one, which is collection system improvements, wiping out the remaining $8,723 that's there. And then project number 23 is completed, the North Pump Station diversion structure, so we're moving $115,006 remaining there. putting that together with the 305, 535 from 2011 to fund the oxygen control project escrow funding of $429,264.
Terrific. Thank you. Any other council comments on this resolution?
One, if
Councilor
I may.
Walsh?
Thank you.
Should just stop sitting down.
Yeah.
Just stay there for a
Sorry.
moment.
The project number 16 with the number, that's pretty lengthy, and then the project description 830823.
I saw that was a copy and paste error on my part in terms
get
of
it.
the Excel spreadsheet that actually created this PDF. So that oxygen, it's sort of described there in the project status, but there's a project at the wastewater treatment plant, this oxygen control project, that was a previously approved project in the 2014 bond fund. The way projects at the wastewater treatment plant work, because we provide services not just for the city, but also for bulk sewer partners, the partners and the city put funds into an escrow account. The project expenses are paid out of that escrow account. If there are any excess funds at the end of the project, they get returned to each of the partners and the city on a pro rata basis. If additional funds are needed because the project has gone over budget, change orders, something like that, then each of the partners has to put in additional funds on a pro rata basis. The city's portion of those escrow projects at the wastewater treatment plant is just under 50%.
Thank you.
Sure.
And any comments from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris?
Ms. Beke?
Aye.
Mr. Cleese?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
Thank you. And that takes us to resolution number 81, 2022. Mr. Harris?
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster approving an amended capital project list to be funded by the proceeds of the City of Lancaster General Obligation Bonds Series of 2018.
I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Hopkins, round us out.
So this one is very similar, but a little more expanded only because there are more funds available remaining in the 2018 bond fund. So this one, this exhibit has two different sections. One is for sewer projects and then the other is for water projects. So in the sewer projects, effectively what we're doing at the top part of this, the amended project budgets, we're removing a little over $3.3 million from the North Second Clarifier number 6 project, which is only just starting design phase, so we don't need the construction dollars there right now, and moving those funds to a series of other projects where we need to fund escrows very similar to what I described with the last exhibit. And then there are two new projects to be added to the authorized project list. That's the compost building demolition for $109,010. And when it's that precise, you know that we bid the project and we know what the cost is going to be. And then Conestoga Gardens and Stevens Avenue Pump Station interceptor capacity and condition assessment project, and that is really a design and engineering project for $250,000. So the net of all of those changes actually means that we're reducing net project funding by about $41.6 thousand. There are still several $1 million of unallocated funds in the 2018 portion of the sewer 2018 bond fund. And so with these changes, then we'll be able to basically rebalance everything, get a good picture of what those unexpended and unallocated funds are in the sewer fund portion, so that Steve Campbell and his team in DPW can figure out the projects that need to be funded, the already approved projects that need to be funded with those funds. And then the second part of this is very similar, but it's related to the water fund. In this case, we have the membrane replacement at the Conestoga Water Treatment Plant. We're just removing about $14,000 from that project because those membranes have been completed. We're removing $1.9 million from the Oyster Point 42-inch main Phase 1 projects. We had built in a pretty sizable contingency into that project budget, and fortunately, it's ended up that we haven't needed nearly as much of that contingency as we thought. We're zeroing out the 2019 water main replacement project to tune of $291,000, and reducing excess funds in the Bousman and Lafayette tank painting and maintenance projects. So we're reducing those project budgets by about $2.3 million. We're adding a 2022 water main replacement project of $412,634, valve replacements at $500,000, and then special and emergency water projects at $1.4 million. And so those two sets of numbers basically net out. So we're removing $2.3 million of project funding and creating $2.3 million of projects.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any council comments on this resolution?
Counselor Bege.
Councilor Walsh?
Mr. Hopkins, when you earlier had indicated, we're cleaning up from 2018, would we expect to see another amendment of reallocation of funds once we've settled all of the adjustments with anything unexpended?
Well, not on the water side, I don't believe, because all of the project funds in the 2018 bond fund on the water portion have already been either expended or they're assigned to a particular project that's ongoing. In the sewer fund, it is possible, although there's a whole list of authorized projects on that 2018 list that never had a funding provided to them. And so I think what's more likely is that we're now going to be able to fund some of those projects to move forward, whereas before, without this reallocation, they wouldn't have been available.
Thank you.
Sure.
And any public comments on the resolution? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Ms. Beke,
Aye.
Mr. Calise,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
and Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Director Hopkins. All right, that takes us to Resolution 82 of 2022. Mr. Harris?
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster requesting a Community Conservation Partnership Program grant of $1 million from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to be used for the completion of the Northeast Greenway Trail Conestoga Boardwalk.
Motion to approve.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Councilor Walsh?
Thank you. I think the resolution does a pretty nice job of outlining what this is and what it is for. I think coming out of Public Works, I think we have seen the importance of applying for federal or state funding as it becomes available, so best of luck. But I think this is a very interesting application, and I look forward to seeing the results if they come through. Director Campbell, do you have any sense of timeline for application submission and then decision? I know that it's not always so clear.
It's not, you're correct, it's not always so clear. Thank you very much for inviting me up. Yes, our intention is that the application would be made as soon as possible. We hope that we would hear back about that application in early 2023, and so we could apply it to the project and have that project well underway by 2024. This is, just for a little bit of context as well, this is the stretch of the Greenway from just north of the Operations Center to just beyond, just north of the Amtrak line on the west side of the Conestoga River. It's estimated to be about approximately a $4 million project. We already have $2.8 million from state and PennDOT other funds. The city has also made a contribution partly from the funds that Director Hopkins was just talking about in the amount of $245,000, I believe, towards this project. So we're just at $1 million deficit, if you will. And that in part is because the engineering challenges dealing with the Amtrak surround were more extensive and more expensive than originally anticipated.
Thank you for that context, and I think it's, a testament to your willingness to want to get this done by having to leverage all of the different funding sources to get a project like this complete.
Thank you.
Are there any further council comments?
Yes, may I?
Councilor Diaz?
I have a question regarding the work with the municipality and also with the city. Have they thought about working together with the city in this project? Have you?
When you say the municipality, Lancaster Township?
Yeah.
Yes, we have a very good speaking working relationship. The ability to contribute funds is a bit of a challenge in that regard, but we have a very good working relationship and are coming to accord. This is also demonstrating itself not only with this particular stretch of the active transportation plan, but there's another piece, which is the east end of the eastbound connector, which has that kind of a challenge as well. The talking is there. We have to come to agreement with not only Lancaster Township, but Manheim Township, because that particular connection is at Rank Road, where Walnut Street, where Chestnut Street becomes Rank Road, et cetera, et cetera. We have three municipalities coming together at that particular place. Getting them all in the same accord is a challenge. It's not impossible. We will make it happen. But I believe, frankly, that our communication relationships have improved over the last couple of years or so because of a number of other cooperative actions, not the least of which being the Bridgeport project, where a fourth municipality, East Lampeter, was also involved. So we've all come to different kinds of talking terms to realize common goals.
So in regards to doing the project, they're willing to
Provide many of the
to
approvals.
speak and see if
Well,
approved?
to provide many of the approvals that might be necessary from them without the funding. This particular stretch is within the
city limit?
the jurisdiction of the city of Lancaster.
Okay.
So we don't have any challenges in that regard. Other pieces, other segments, we have a little bit more of a challenge, but we'll literally cross those bridges when we come to them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Any other council comments? Or from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Ms. Baker?
Aye.
Mr. Cleese?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
And Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
Thank you. Takes us to resolution number 84, 2022. Mr. Harris?
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster approving a projection easement agreement between the City of Lancaster and SREG Queen LLC, granting an easement to SREG for building encroachments into the public right-of-way over North Queen Street and North Market Street, as more fully set forth in the projection easement agreement.
Motion to approve.
Second?
We have motion and a second. This was introduced through Community Planning Committee and Councilor Craig, but I do believe I see Douglas Smith who's here this evening. Douglas, is there anything else that you wanted to add about the project that was not touched on in committee? I guess the answer could be no, but here he comes. Good evening.
Good evening, councilors. And just for the public who's streaming, my answer is no. I don't actually have anything else to add, but if you do have questions, I'm happy to elaborate on this more.
Appreciate that. Are there any other council questions or comments on this particular resolution?
Councilor Bakay,
Councilor Walsh?
just one quick point of clarification. This is for the pedestrian easement? I'm looking at the plans and there's a few easements.
It looks
I
like
wanted to
there's
make sure.
several.
There's two.
Yes, good question. So this is a projection easement into the public right-of-way. So the agreement that you were provided is between the developer and the city of Lancaster, who owns the public right-of-way. The developer is looking to have a number of projections in the public right-of-way, including a foundation that goes under a portion of the sidewalk, a canopy to denote, actually 3 canopies to denote 3 different entrances, one on Queen Street and 2 on Chestnut Street. And then there's also a cap on the building approved by the Historical Commission, like you would see on a lot of historic buildings throughout the city, that also protrudes partly into the public right-of-way. So the easement that you're approving this evening, or that you would consider for approval this evening, is the totality of those features in the public right-of-way around the building on Queen and Chestnut. So if you were to take a bird's eye view, it's sort of the greatest extent of all of those together. So the pedestrian easement doesn't need to be approved by city council. That would be a deed restriction that the developer would voluntarily provide prior to plan recordation.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Sure.
Are there any other council comments? Or from members of the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Ms. Beke,
Aye.
Mr. Calise,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
and Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
Great. That takes us to our second public comment period for this evening. It's open for residents to speak about issues that were not covered on the agenda. Again, as a reminder, duration of comments is limited to no longer than 3 minutes, and you will begin with your name and your block of residence for the record. Is there anyone who wishes to give public comment this evening? Hearing none. We'll move on then to the report of the mayor. The mayor is out of town this evening, and I was not provided a specific report unless anyone else sitting in the room has one. We'll go on to the report of President of Council. President of Council is not here this evening, and I do not have a report from Council President Smith Waddell, so we'll move into any council comments. Are there any council comments this evening?
May I?
Councilor Diaz.
I just want to invite everybody to Latino Heritage event, which will be from 12 to 6, if I'm not mistaken, at Binns Park. So come on out, let's dance some salsa, let's eat arroz con habichuela, and that's the way it goes.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, that will be the first big event in newly opened Ewell Plaza, and there's going to be a lot of really good food there. I'm excited about that, so please join us on Saturday. Thank you. Any other council comments? Hearing none, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.